Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome to the No Woman Left Behind show. I am Rosie Zilinskas. Today we're going to be talking to Heather Bennett, who is a branding expert. Heather Bennett is a marketing strategist, author, board director, and personal brand coach with over 20 years experience marketing brands. Drawing from her background in research and development, a University of Illinois MBA, and Northwestern University social media marketing certification, she coaches her clients to create strong, authentic, and unique brands through her business creative brand coach. Heather is the author of Amazon bestseller Fun and Fulfilling Careers, One Question at a Time. Heather is going to explain all things about personal branding. So let's jump right in. All right, Heather, thank you so much for being here today. I know you and I have been talking for about a year, and I know that you are the founder of Creative Brand Coach and that you wrote a book recently. But before we get into your book, I want to just kind of start asking you, Heather, what is branding? What does it mean? What is it?
Okay, so Rosie, two things. There's branding, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. So branding is, in general, what we think of about something. It is all the aspects that make it unique, even in its set of other objects or things like it. So when you think of ketchup, there's ketchup is ketchup. However, you have Heinz ketchup, that's a specific type, and that's a brand. And it separates it from all the other ketchups out there. So that's an example of that. But the branding I think you're most interested in is the personal branding. And that's for people and individuals, specifically for use in their career and their businesses. So that level of personal branding, the short answer is, it's what people say professionally about you when you leave the room. So that's one way I've heard describe it. I view personal branding as all the aspects of you and your experience, your skill set, what you represent, who you interact with, that explain who you are compared to everyone else who does similar work to what you do. And the importance of personal branding is that it allows you to stand out from everyone else in your career, in your business, in your industry.
Okay, sounds good. So branding is something that anybody in corporate can have. So specifically, I think you know, as well as our listeners, that we're here to talk about women in corporate, how to move up the ladder, how to advance in their career. So is personal branding something that's just for entrepreneurs, or is it for women in corporate?
No, you really hit on the fact that it is for everyone who's in business or in working on their careers. One of the biggest misconceptions I come across with people when it comes to personal branding is they believe it's only for influencers or people who are famous or celebrities, and that's not true. The personal brand is what you bring to work with you, to every project, to every client site, to every interaction. And now more than ever, it's so important to have a strong personal brand in a corporate setting, especially if you want to make those bigger leaps to advancement in your career or to be recognized in the industry. In fact, personal branding really helps with being recognized in your industry as a key opinion leader. as a key thought leader, which will give you the opportunity to be recognized via awards or be asked to speak at conferences or to co-author papers or to be asked to be the person who's put on a specific project because you're known for being good at what you are.
I love that. I love that, being that you're known for being good at what you are. I think that's really key, again, specifically for women in corporate. So obviously we just talked about branding a little bit, like what it is, and we know that corporate women can use that. So Heather, I got your book, I read your book, and I'm going to show it, and your book is fantastic. So this book, everyone, is Fun and Fulfilling Careers, One Question at a Time. And I've always known about branding. I've known about branding for years, but I think for a lot of people, branding is still a little bit elusive. Like, what is it exactly? Like, what am I supposed to talk about myself in, when I'm talking about my branding? And I'm actually pulling up page 17 of your book, which I think is the crux of the entire book. I fell in love with this page. And for those listeners that aren't watching this on video, there is a rectangle in the middle, and it says building blocks to a personal brand, which I think is awesome. And then you have 4 other rectangles around it. One of them is self-awareness. The second one is experience. Then you have growth mindset and strategic planning. And the reason why I love this is because it's so visual and it's so easy to understand. And I read your book, I did the exercises, and I think it's like the simplest, most straightforward way that I've ever seen someone describe personal brand. So congratulations, first of all, on your book. I think it's fantastic. And second of all, on this page, because again, page 17 is the crux of the whole book. So first of all, what prompted you to write this book?
That's a very good question. About 3 years ago, I was asked, it was the 7-month period where every one of my clients, my colleagues, friends, were all saying, what you do and the work that you help people with understanding their personal brand and how to apply it to their careers and how to apply it for success in their business is not expected. It's not usual. And it's done in a methodology that most people have not seen before. So could you just write it down? So I was being asked repeatedly, like it kept coming up, and it wasn't me saying anything. It was people out of the blue coming to talk to me and saying, you really need to write a book, because the way you do this is so straightforward and realistic and easy. You take something complicated that seems like it would be overwhelming to do and make it easy for everyone to do. It's not, this doesn't have to be a difficult process if you break it down into simple, and that's why I call this a building blocks, because it's really breaking it down into those simple ways and simple steps to get to what your personal brand is.
And so let's talk about those building blocks. I know there's 4 of them. So do you think maybe you could just describe each one in maybe a sentence or 2 what it means? So let's start with self-awareness.
And that's, I love that we're starting with self-awareness, because really that's the best place to start. And these logically go in order. And you'll see when I talk about them, why they go in order. So first, being aware of who you are and what you bring to the table. And that's, your skills, your talents, your personality traits. In this section, at the beginning of the book, it lets you really look at yourself and figure out who you are, what's important to you, what you bring to the table. And that's why I start there, because then if you know who you are, you'll know how to describe yourself to others, how to communicate who you are. The next part is to focus on your experiences. So that goes back to work experiences, volunteer experiences, your hobbies, all of these things. Basically, every way that you spend your time influences who you are and how you've shown up for people in the world. And with the consistency there, that will start showing that thread of your personal brand going through the experiences as you look back. Growth mindset is, at this point, you normally start realizing what you've enjoyed and what you haven't enjoyed in a career. in a job. And now you're ready to start looking for that next role. So to get there, you have to have a growth mindset. You have to be willing to understand that that next role may require you to learn a little bit, get out of your comfort zone, maybe do a little more research, interview people in that job. So that's what the growth mindset for is. That's the step where you start doing the work to really get to that next level. And then finally, the strategic planning. At that point, you'll start doing the work. You'll know what you need to prepare. But now the actual setting that plan in place. Who do you need to talk to? What are those exact steps? What research do you need to do for the industries? And how are you going to plan it out over the next 3, 5, 6, 7, 10 months to get to that next role? What do you need to change about your life? And what do you need to communicate? So it really goes that entire time. You're bringing your personal brand almost like a ribbon that goes through all of these different steps to get you to that next role, that next job.
Yeah, and I think you explained it perfectly. And like you said, they are building blocks because there's no possible way you can get to the strategic plan without being self-aware. And then you can't really get to the growth mindset without going through your experience. So I think the way you laid it out is beautiful. And again, it is very easy to understand, very simple to go through. And so I'm glad that everybody was harping on you to actually write the book because you did a great job. So I know that you're going through a lot of different exercises in the book. So what was your thought process in laying out the exercises for each section?
Okay, so the exercises are based on a couple of workbooks that I use with my clients to guide them through this process. So those were done like 6, 7, 8 years ago. So I've been using those for a while and just gradually adding on more and more exercises. So with the exercises in the book, I started with those and then started to see what I needed to add in to make sure it was more of a complete storyline. There was more information coming out, more value coming out at the end of it. So I'm trying to think like at the beginning, the exercises tend to be with a lot of self-reflection because it is that self-awareness. The second part, talking about the experiences, is really going back through your history and what you liked, what you didn't like, what environments you thrived in, which ones you felt stifled or held back in. With the growth mindset, it's starting to do that research. What are my options? Given the skill set I have, given my experience, what are my options going forward? Let's test drive a few of these and figure out. And then at the end of that section, the individual will start to see where they want to go. So then you need to create that strategic plan. So the exercises in that section are really designed to set up those action steps that are going to take you to that next level.
Got it. Now, I know that a lot of women that I talk to are not necessarily aware that they're stuck. They're working really hard. They know they want to move up the ladder, but they don't know how to move up the ladder. And they don't know that they're actually stuck. So for example, a lot of women may not apply for jobs because they don't have the confidence to apply for a job. There's that known statistic that men apply for a job having 60% of the skills and women, wait till they have 100% of the skills. How does your strategic plan, or I should say your entire process, how do you think that could help women that are wanting to move up the ladder, but they're stuck, they're doing all the right things, and they just can't move forward? How do you think this could help them?
Well, a lot of women, you're busy. We're all busy in our careers. We're moving along. We're getting our project done. By really being forced to step back, and look at where you are and what you've done, there's a whole section I have on being proud of what you've accomplished. Just recognizing what you've accomplished and not saying, well, I did that. Okay, well, no, that's a big deal. Recognize that, because then you start understanding, well, during that project and that award that you won, well, why did you win that? Well, you did all of these things. Well, isn't it interesting that a couple of these things are in a job description for a job that you would love to have, that would be an excellent opportunity for you? If we don't have that, top of mind, we don't have all of that right in front of us, we tend to forget what we've accomplished and how we've gotten there. And by remembering that, then you start seeing the opportunities open up, because you say, wait a minute, I actually do know how to do that, or I've done something similar that would apply. So then they're not as afraid to apply for those jobs, like you said, that they feel they don't have exactly 100% for.
Right. And so one of the things that I usually tell people that are trying to figure out what to do or how to keep track of things is like, have a personal folder with your name on it and throw like a note or, a copy of the project that you're doing, because then when you go to write your performance review, then you have that folder with all of the records that you worked throughout the year. Because like you said, the other thing I think is women are afraid of tooting their own horn, recognize their accomplishments and then talking about their accomplishments with their managers, so when, like you said, when they don't recognize themselves, all of what they've done, they are not able to articulate it to their managers. And then that's where, if you can't articulate your value, then how is your manager going to do it for you if you don't know how to do that? So is there maybe a specific building block that would help or exercises that would help recognize how a woman can actually talk better about what they're doing? Just again, like tooting their own horn, singing their own praises. Which section do you think we could point people to that could help them do that, do you think?
I would say probably in the strategic planning section and some of the work a little bit earlier. But what I'm specifically thinking of is working on their elevator pitch. So
let's talk about the elevator pitch.
Yeah, let's talk about the elevator pitch.
Let's talk about the elevator pitch.
Because what's important about the elevator pitch is it's like a perfectly constructed poem with like very strict, like you only have so much time and you have to get your point across during that time. Who you are, why you're worth talking to, how you can help people, and of course, what your ask is, So by really focusing on making that very powerful and strong, it will force you, as a person to really list what you're great at, what your accomplishments are, why they should be listening to you. And that, I think there's a real confidence builder in creating a really powerful elevator pitch and practicing it. Use your friends, use your family, say it in front of a mirror until you get so comfortable and confident that you're representing who you are at your core. You're representing who you are authentically in your personal brand.
Okay, so for those that don't know what an elevator pitch is, why don't we kind of go back and just explain what is an elevator pitch and how do they start putting an elevator pitch together?
Okay, so very simply, an elevator pitch is what you would say if you were to meet someone networking. You're at a conference, you're at a luncheon, you're in a room about to start, leadership development training at your company, and you don't know everyone in the room. So an elevator pitch is a simple way to communicate who you are, and it's a nice formula. You say your name, your title, or what you do, so that they understand who you are in the context of the networking event. So a lot of times, if it's a specific organization, you say why you're there. I belong to this organization because, or I work in this department, so that they have context as to who you are. The next thing would be, you say what you're good at. You say why it's worth talking to you. I'm a best-selling author of a book that launched last year. Or I'm one of the people who worked on the award-winning project that, happened last year for this client. So they have some idea of your accomplishments, why you're important, why you're good at what you do. The next thing you would say is how you can help other people. Say, I help, our clients, I help our customers, I help the finance department accomplish these tasks. And then finally, the last thing would be, and this is interesting in a corporate, I'm going to give an example that is specific for a corporate setting, because normally your ask would be, I'm looking for a job, or I have a book that I'm selling, or I have a product I'm selling. But in a corporate setting, often your ask is much more subtle and much more important to the business that's being done in the corporation. It could be, I'm looking to get to know people in other departments of the company so that I can do my job better. So it's something as simple as that, because the more people you know across a corporate environment, the better you are going to be able to get the job done, because then you'll know who to go to when somebody asks a question that's outside of your knowledge base.
And that is actually a great point, because if you are, say in sales and you are trying to understand something about compliance, for example, because you're selling something and you need to, understand something about the compliance, perspective of it. If you don't know anybody in compliance, then who are you going to go to, right? So, to your point, if you are, even if you don't know the specifics about compliance, but you know who to go to and who the resource is, and then you start learning a little bit about the particulars of compliance in order to make you a better salesperson. So I think that's great to be able to network within your organization across other departments, because the more you know about what other departments do, then the easier it is for you to do your job, like you said. Absolutely. I know another component to branding, as we all know, is salary, right? Like the gender gap. And actually, I was just so bummed the other day because I read an article that was saying that the pandemic has eroded all of the gains that we've made over the last decade in the gender gap. And I was just so bummed. I'm like, oh my gosh, how is that possible? But you know what? It is what it is. And we're back at it, and we're working towards eradicating the gender gap. Confidence is one thing to talk about salary. And another statistic that I read is that women over a lifetime can make up to $2 million less than men by not negotiating. Yes. So would you say that when you work on your personal brand, that gives you the confidence to maybe negotiate salary? Would you say that's a benefit to personal branding?
Definitely. I think the confidence starts even before that.
Okay.
Because when you're preparing and getting to know your personal brand, you're starting that process of understanding who you are, what you bring to the table, how you can make a difference. That's creating your elevator pitch. So now you've got your elevator pitch, which is how you will hopefully get your next set of interviews. So once you get those set of, and between that is making sure you have a great LinkedIn profile, making sure you have a resume, making sure you've got your business cards that you're handing out. There's all those, steps in between. But to get to that interview, during that interview, you're going to have to be selling yourself, probably multiple times to multiple different people. And the interview process has gotten much more complicated and longer, which is good, because hopefully that means the job is going to be a better fit when you get to it. But by taking the time to really work on your personal brand before you get to all of those interviews and that final process where they do give you a package and say, we want you, here's what we can offer. At that point, you'll be confident enough to know what you're worth. And you'll have done the research to find out, well, what is the salary for someone of this position? So having done that research ahead of time, knowing why you're valuable, why you're worth getting this job, that will give you the confidence to stop when they give that package to you and say, okay, I'm going to think about it. And then to come back with what you feel you need to negotiate. Really good point, though. That is a point that Women, that's a really big sticking point for them in terms of changing that gender pay inequality.
Yes, absolutely. I recently heard that Colorado has started I don't know if they put it into law yet, but they're, trying to put it into law where if you are posting a job, you're supposed to post the salary range as well. So I think that's huge, a great step towards eradicating that pay gap, because if you know what the salary range is, at least you're not going to have such a disparity between men and women as far as how much they make, especially when it comes to additional, minorities and all this stuff, that then the gap even gets better, or bigger too. So, but that's good news about Colorado. So if all the states in the United States follow that, that's going to be fantastic for the gender equality. But I also had read that for women, or I should say for girls confidence peaks at age 9, and then it plummets. And I was just, oh my goodness, that's just so disheartening. But again, I guess the other thing that I want to talk about as far as branding doesn't just have to start when you work, right? Branding can actually start in college and even in high school. And even like for those, girls that are really ambitious, they can even start working on their personal brand in grade school, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. A lot of what your personal brand is comes from what's important to you, what your purpose is, what your mission is, what you're passionate about. And all of that starts much more early on than people, I think, acknowledge. The beginning of my book, I do a lot of exercises that ask people to really step back to their childhood and understand what they naturally gravitated for, what they enjoyed, what made them excited and passionate about, whether it was a sport or an activity, or what they like to read, or what they like to do with their free time, because that tends to indicate where their purpose and mission is going to be long term. So definitely, at the very least, in middle school is, I think, one of the best times to start that. Right when, like as you said, that confidence level is starting to go down, that would be a good time to push in and really take the opportunity to mentor girls, try to give them opportunities to learn about the executive functions and why it's important to have an elevator pitch, to know what you stand for, to know what you're looking for, and to have the confidence to be able to communicate that.
Yeah. And I would also, for all the women that are listening, if they have daughters or nieces, I think it's always really important for us as, being in my second half of my career, that's the reason why I started all this, because I wanted to start giving back to women. And I think, I realize it's not just women in corporate, it's younger women in college, women in high school, again, just younger women. And the more we can all pull each other up, the more we can eradicate this gender gap overall. Hopefully at some point in our life we can do that. But I think it's important for just women to know. And also, branding is not subjected to just corporate. It could be entrepreneurs. It could be, whatever kind of job you have. I think I heard someone say a long time ago, I'm the best janitor that's ever out there. So and this individual just had such pride to do a great job as a janitor. And so that was his brand, the pride and the joy of doing a good job. So it doesn't, like, personal branding doesn't have to be specifically to one segment of anything. It could be applicable to pretty much every single job or schooling, grade, whatever your stage in life is, right? So as far as continuing to move up the ladder, say I do the work and I have my personal brand and I'm good to go, and I get my new job, I start my job and it's a couple years in. At what point do I revisit this process?
That's an excellent question. So bare minimum, this process should be revisited anytime you're making a major change or you're considering a major change. Because at that point, there's more information. It's, I'm originally a scientist, so it's like, what's the data? What's the research behind it? So as you've experienced more, and to your point, I love your file idea. The idea of, as you're working on projects or working with clients, to capture that information so that when you get to a point where you have to step back and look at what's going on with your personal brand, with your career, you have that ready. So I'd say anytime that there's a career transition, anytime there's a major life shift, all of a sudden you're moving across the country, you have changed, your housing situation. Anytime there's a major life change is a good time to step back and think about what's important to you and how to apply that to your career and job going forward.
It's almost like every year when, the year turns, everybody starts thinking about their goals for the year, and you kind of have to revisit it. And we all know that people that have written goals are, they advance in their careers faster than people that don't have written goals or that have never thought about their goals. Because when you're intentional about doing your brand, writing your goals, knowing what you want to do and then trying to get to the next level, I think things move a lot quicker than if you're just kind of there, not engaged in your work and just kind of like, okay, I'm not really going to worry about it. I'm here, 8 to 4:30 or whatever. And then I just clock out. So I think it's completely two different mindsets. People that are working on their brand have that growth mindset, where I think people that don't even think about it, I think they're almost in the fixed mindset camp, because they don't think about the growth. So,
and to your point, I was going to add, bare minimum is when there's a major transition, but ideally you really should be doing this type of exercise at least once a year. I have a couple of the exercises in it. My time mapping and timeline planning are great exercises to keep you on track for meeting those goals. Exactly. When you write them down, when they're visually in front of you, it's so much easier to accomplish them.
Absolutely. And I remember throughout the book, you have all these different quotes from different people, and the quotes are applicable to the exercises that you're doing. So I really like that as well. So Heather, tell me a little bit about your background. You said you're a scientist. So tell me a little bit about your background and how you even got here.
Okay, so I started out doing research and development in biology for Unilever, so large consumer brands company. Got to know a lot of marketing people and working on brands there, fell in love with the concept of brands and how having a powerful brand could really serve the people who use the products and help them. So I went back, got my MBA from University of Illinois, and it was just a great experience. I had so much fun. At that point, went into consumer products marketing for Kraft and Kitchen and a couple other companies. It was wonderful. I love that work. There's always a part of me that's going to love looking at shampoo bottles on a shelf and look. I could do that for hours and find it absolutely fascinating. But I think a lot of what I liked about that were the same things that I got from my research and development. I love collecting data. I love testing things. A lot of marketing is doing A/B testing and figuring out what works, doing market research, and really understanding what that target market needs. At that point, I was working full-time in corporate, but I was getting these side hustle gigs, helping people out with their startups, or they were having issues with, their product, their product company, and there was problems, and they'd be referred to me by friends or neighbors or whoever, or major career decisions. And I was like, I don't have a background in HR. I do. Why are you coming to me? But what I started seeing is by applying the lens of brand marketing to the person and helping them understand their personal brand first, then we would go after those business problems. And only by understanding who they were, why they were doing what they were doing, what was important to them, then I could help them with things like, oh, well, your finance situation's a little off here. We need to work on that. Or, there's a problem with how you're sourcing your product, or, you're not working well with your employee. There's an issue there. Let's fix that. But it all had to start with who they were and their personal brand and what they were bringing to the business, to the situation.
Okay. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Now, going back to the shampoo bottles, you said that you love looking at all the shampoo bottles, and obviously it all has branding, right? But
Yeah.
branding, or even like shampoo bottles, if you notice, there's almost like a gender gap in the branding there, because all the girl shampoos, they're like pink and purple, and all the beautiful scents, and all the men shampoo bottles are like just all manly. So even that has some kind of distinction between men and women. And it's just an example of like branding matters, right? Because a woman is probably not going to buy a shampoo that's really manly smelling, so meaning that you need to cater to yourself. You need to create your brand that fits you, that you're comfortable with, that you love. And when you really love what you stand for, then you're able to advocate more for yourself, and you're able to advertise. So one of the things that I always say is you need to go talk to people and tell them what you're up to. I had this coworker years ago. He would say, I manage up, I make sure that I let my manager know what I'm doing and what I'm up to, because it was important for him to promote himself for his brand. Now, talking about managers and branding, do you have any experience on how a manager could improve as a manager, to become a better manager, I should say, by developing their brand so that they can develop their subordinates? Do you have any insight on that?
Yes. I think right now we're at a point where there's a lot of questions about the employee-employer relationship, and the sense that loyalty is gone in the workplace. No one sticks around forever until they hit their pension, their 10-year mark, their 15-year mark anymore. And with that question is a concern over how to keep employees engaged so that they stay with companies, because we all know that the cost of getting a new employee is way, 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 way higher than retaining the ones that you already have and the great talent. And I would say not only retaining, but developing.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, that's really the key, is as a manager, if you show that you are taking the time to develop your skills and to improve your skills and to be a better manager, that opens the door for you to talk to the people who work for you about how you can help them develop, how you can help them to be their best self, and to understand how they can be the best employee they can be, not only for you, but for themselves, for their career. And by developing them, you'll end up getting a much better team. Loyalty will increase, engagement will increase, retention. I mean, really, employee retention is all over the news right now. How do we retain our employees?
Right.
Well, by telling them that they're important enough that we want to develop them. That's an excellent step forward.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think just by making your employees aware that you care about their success, that if they succeed, you succeed. And, I've heard throughout, years, people say, oh yeah, I come up with the idea and my manager takes the credit. And I think that's just awful, because when I used to be in management, I would be the first one to praise my coworkers. I always called them my coworkers, because they'd say, it's always my boss, this is my boss. I'm like, no, I'm not your boss. I'm your coworker, because, we're on the same team. We just have different jobs. But I thought it was just so awful for someone to say, oh yeah, my manager takes all the credit. And I'm like, why would they do that? It's like, if I give you credit, credit that you deserve, it makes you look good, which makes me look good. So it's like, I'm not going to take credit for all your hard work. But I do think that still in this day and age, people leave bosses, not jobs, because bosses sometimes they just don't. And I don't know that it's necessarily that bosses don't want to develop their people. I think it's that they, number one, don't have the time because they're busy doing their jobs. And then the second thing is they don't maybe necessarily know how to develop people. And then the third thing is sometimes people don't want to be developed, they just want to be left alone and, just don't talk to me. So there's a bunch of different components there, right? But I think the point is that even if you're not looking to move up the ladder, even if you're happy in the position that you are in, you can still create your brand, develop your brand, and help others that are around you, not just above you or below you, but just coworkers in general. You can talk about brand. You can, tell them about Heather's wonderful book, because again, I think this is a great book and it has everything really well laid out. So Heather, what's next for you? Like what are you working on now? How can people find you? And tell us a little bit about what you're up to now.
Well, I am thinking about that employee engagement. So I am thinking a lot about what personal branding looks like, not just for job seekers, but for job keepers. So in terms of what's really resonating with me right now, that going forward, I really think there's an opportunity to think about leadership and development in a more strategic level. So I'm in the middle of a board certification class for board governance, and which will make me very well prepared to sit on boards of directors. I've sat on board of directors before, but I wanted to take it more seriously because of how important it is at this point for leadership to really increase that employee retention and employee engagement. So that's why I'm looking forward to an opportunity to do that. And then where they can reach me, I'm on LinkedIn, Heather H. Bennett, the easiest way to find me. Twitter, Creative Brand CH, so Creative Brand Coach. And then my website, creativebrandcoach.net and heatherhbennett.com.
Okay, so and by the way, all of that information is going to be on the blog, so nobody has to write anything. You can just go to No Woman Left Behind and all of Heather's information will be there. So before I let you go, Heather, I want to ask you one last question, if you could share. Could you provide 2 actionable recommendations that people can do today to start working on their brand?
2 actionable. Let's see, what would be 2 good ones for this week? Let's see. Well, we just started the new year. So one thing I would say is to look at your calendar for this month and for the year and write down how you're spending your time. Put down the major ways that you are spending your time and really think about each of those commitments, each of those responsibilities, and whether you want to still be doing those in a year. So that's a really simple way to start with that. The second thing I would say, probably work on that elevator pitch. It's so actionable if you work on it, and start now, because promoting yourself and speaking and being confident in who you are and what you're asking for is a muscle. The more you practice it, the better you'll get. So those would be the 2 I'd focus on this week.
All right, I love it. Well, Heather, thank you so much for stopping by and talking to us about such an amazing topic. Again, I think it's very necessary for everyone to know what personal brand is, and you explain it very well and simply. So again, I have raved about your book. I actually was talking to someone earlier today and I showed them your book. I was like, oh my gosh, this is a great book. So again, highly recommended. But again, thank you, Heather, for being here. I really appreciate it. All right, cool. That was such a great conversation with Heather Bennett. I do believe that Heather's book, which is Fun and Fulfilling Careers, One Question at a Time, is one of the must-read books about branding. She goes through the various steps in depth, and she has some exercises. So I highly, highly recommend this book. I'm going to recap the 2 things that Heather gave us as far as tips on what you can do to apply to your career today. So the first one is look at your calendar and identify any major commitments that you've been spending time on, and figure out if you want to be doing those same commitments a year from now. The second thing is work on your elevator pitch. Heather said, promoting yourself and being confident in who you are and what you're asking for is a muscle. The more you practice, the better you will get at that. I hope you guys got really good value from this episode. Please let me know if there's any other questions or anything specific that you would like to know about branding. I'm picturing in the future having Heather back onto our podcast so that she can go a little bit more in depth into some of the components that she has about branding. And with that, we are at the end of time. So I hope you guys have a great day, and until next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends, because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.